Hi, everybody. I'm John Horn. Thanks for coming out. As you can see, we have quite a few people joining us. So I'm going to bring them out now, and we'll have our conversation. And if they say anything that you think is crazy, call them out on. Producer-writer Chris Miller. Producer-writer Phil Lord. Director Joaquim dos Santos. Actor Jake Johnson. Director Kemp Powers. Actor Jason Schwartzman. Director Justin Thompson. And actor Daniel Kaluuya. Clearly, a lot of people were involved in the making of this film. I think more than 1,000 by some counts. And I'm curious, when you have that many people working on a film, including 3 directors, a couple of writer-producers, how do you reach consensus on an idea? Because sometimes the only thing that people can agree on is the most obvious answer, and that clearly does not work in this film. So how did that play out?
Well, I mean, that's why you get people who are not people who go for the obvious answer. Everybody here that's sitting here, and pretty much everybody in this crew of 1,000 people, are people who were trying to do something new and trying to do something different. We all wanted to make something that felt fresh, that you hadn't seen before. The first movie, made a big impact on the industry, and many movies since have had to reconcile with it. And that movie, we felt like it just sort of cracked the door open, and this one we really wanted to kick it down. Yeah. And so when you're making a movie of this scale, it is over 1,000 filmmakers and artists working on the movie. It is the largest and most ambitious animated movie that's ever been made, as far as we know.
We like to say it's the Ben-Hur of animation, with fewer dead horses. Yeah, and it's just, but instead of 1,000 extras, there's 1,000 artists. And it's an astute question that you ask, because yes, you could arrive at answers that are the average of everybody's ideas, and that's incredibly dangerous. We were just talking literally on the way in, like, everybody up here is a filmmaker, and we try to treat every crew member the same way. And our cast, they are all filmmakers outside of the recording booth, outside of their incredible performances. We were all talking about hey, how's your movie? You know what I mean? And that autonomy and the agency that everybody up here, everybody on this crew bring to everything that they're working on. It might be you're a lighting artist and it's just that one shot that you have for the week. But everybody is bringing, when you watch the movie, you go you can see everyone's personality.
I want to ask more about that. I've been on the set of one of your live action films, and you'll sometimes throw out a line, what about this? Say, his mother's got whatever. That doesn't really work in animation.
Oh, but it does.
Oh, okay. So tell me how it does. I want to ask the actors how that works, because...
Let's talk about Daniel Kaluuya's improv history.
Okay, I want to hear it.
If I'm being perfectly... I didn't know Daniel had an improv background until we were in the recording booth, and he was improving, and I had to stand in for Miles. And I don't know if you know this dude, but I was I don't think this dude likes me, because you were clowning me as Spider-Punk the first day we met, and I was fuck, I think Daniel Kaluuya hates me, because he was just so in the role of Hobie Brown, and I had to be Miles and just take so many insults in a row. But
did that end up in the movie? I mean, tell us.
Yeah,
I mean, how that worked.
I think some of it did. I think but it was amazing, because they just empowered me to find the character. Find the voice. Do you know what I mean? Because it was creating this new thing. Do you know what I'm saying? And I did I've done 3 years of improv. When I was 13 to 16, that's how I got into acting. And so it was kind of an amazing opportunity to kind of practice, use that muscle that it's kind of been dormant when you just do scripted work. And it was just, I think a lot of it, I think I swore a lot. I mean, we couldn't use that, but yeah, no, I get
the intent.
No, I don't believe in consistency was your improv line. I think that was his improv line, wasn't it? It was like, I don't believe in teams, and it was like, aren't you in a band? And he was like, I don't believe in consistency. Oh shit, that's dope. And we just kind of roll with it.
I want to ask Jason and Jake an iteration of that question in terms of performance. How often are you recording by yourself? Are you recording with other actors? How do you get that emotional intimacy? And clearly these characters have your voice in them. They feel like your own characters. How does that play itself out when you're actually performing?
Well, we read with the directors a lot, and I read with Phil a lot on this one too. So you're always reading with somebody. It's the best when you get to read with another actor, but everybody involved here is so passionate about it. So it's not like we're recording from home in like the bathroom on our phone. You are performing the scene, you're doing it over and over. You're able to try things, and yes, there's improv, but the scripts are really tight too. You know, I've never gotten a script for this. Sometimes when we'd start, you guys will always apologize and be like, "This is rough," and I'm like, "This is not rough. This is a good scene," and then we open it up. So it's kind of a nice balance as an actor.
Jason?
Yeah, and I think that exactly everything that Jake said, I completely echo. And then I think also it's amazing that, you know, everyone up here, the ability to act and listen and work together in the moment was so amazing. Like, just something could be said and someone, you know, up here, all these people would just hear one thing and it would trigger some other idea or some other thing, and the openness, the almost like musical improvisation, like hearing a phrase or something and then going down that, it was so wonderful to do that. And I would leave the session so excited and exhausted and almost like with amnesia, like what happened? like I had been like in some kind of hypnosis, or like I don't know what we did. You know, because it would just be like we would go on these all these different places, and it's just wonderful because you're following these amazing people who have amazing ears and hearts and brains, and it's like really just like an honor to be there.
And these guys are being modest. They all we had a lot of deep conversations about who these characters were. We had conversation about the script before anybody got in the booth, and they all became, over the years that it took to craft their performances, they became our partners and the stewards of those characters, and they were demanding in great ways that were really productive, that what they were doing mattered, and they kind of held us. I was telling Daniel, like, he held us to account. Wow. In a way that made the movie better.
I want to ask you a little bit about the evolution of animation over the last few years and some of the slights that it still faces. First, to parrot what Guillermo del Toro says about his stop motion Pinocchio, he said, animators are really actors, and they can give a character as much humanity and emotional truth as a fully live action performance by a human. And I think this film has that, and also production design, the amazing production design in this film, cinematography and editing are either at or way above the base level of live action. Has that something that you have noticed almost in real time over the last 10 years? There's still the slights, but are people starting to recognize that this isn't a cartoon, this is acting?
Yeah, I mean, I think the audience, they came out for this movie, right? They came and they saw it many times. They really appreciated it. And I think generally, historically, people that don't understand what does an animation editor do? Like, how do you edit? Doesn't it, you know? It's not like you got a bunch of footage and you cut all the takes together, but you do. It's very analogous to live action. And in fact, there was probably more editing on this than probably any live action movie.
If they give an award for most editing, it should be.
It literally is 10 times the file size on the Avid of a regular movie. Right. And the Avid would crash daily.
Yeah. And we would call Avid and be like, "Can you please come and like make our machine more robust?" And they go, "We can't. It's not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to use it for something that big."
I want to ask the actors about that. You record and then you see the performance of your voice as animated, and what does that feel like about what they bring to life, the animators, what they bring to life in taking your voice as the starting point?
It's pretty surreal. I remember when the first time they showed me it, I was just like, I can't believe I've been this film, this is the coolest shit in the world. Like, it's kind of like, I was like a dream. But it's like a weird, it was a process where you, it forced me to stop being in my own head, and actually like kind of surrender to the process and surrender to the work and kind of just give, and go, oh, what'd you figure out? What'd you like with this? And how's this, that? How's that? Like, it's kind of like, most of what do you need? You know what I mean? I feel like was the question that I always kind of approached the session with is like, and wanting to give them all the flavors of what they needed. Do you know what I mean? So that they can go off and but also finding new things that could influence the animation and vice versa. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a weird how you're in sync with something that has a fragmentation to a level. You know what I mean?
And seeing it as an actor, you get to be a fan. So you don't get to do that, at least I don't, as live action. Because I don't get to watch something and I'm in and be like, he looks great. That's a hell of a shot. Nice wonder with that guy. But watching this, you actually get to watch it and you almost forget about the fact that you did the voices. And so I get to experience the way the audience does, where I'm like, this is just a gorgeous movie. Yeah. Like, it's spectacular, and I'm able to say that because I didn't do any of that. It was really great, guys. Well done.
I'm going to ask about Spider-Punk design because it's so, I mean, not just like the other dimensions or universes, but there's something special about Spider-Punk, about how, I'd love to know how it came about, and was it hard to find that design given all the other designs you're trying to come up with?
Well, yeah, Justin, you go. I will say, before you start, it was the easiest in a way and the hardest in a way, because I think the touchstone of the sort of era of punk rock posters and stuff, that was day one. Like, we talked about that really early.
Yeah.
But finding his design was probably one of the hardest things in the film.
Yeah, and we brought on a ton of artists who were really connected to the punk rock poster era, and ourselves, like, we just researched and studied and grew up loving the punk rock era, and so just trying to find a way we could take those punk rock posters, bring them to life, and also just trying to find a way to encapsulate like this instigator, this character who was like this instigator and this mentor to Miles, and sort of this character. And it took a long time. The hardest thing was actually trying to figure out how to give a performance to the different looks. And so as we went along, you had Daniel's performance. It influenced how the character acted on screen. And then we had tools. Our visual effects supervisor, Michael Lasker, he actually and his team, they created these amazing tools that gave our animators to be able to react in real time to Daniel's performance. They could choose these different looks, like whether it was a black and white poster or whether it was, you know, like pink and yellow, and hit emotional cues. But all of that kind of, these different poster looks that we created took probably about 2 years to develop.
And where did the Camden Town reference come from?
Guess who's from Camden Town?
No way.
I was born in Camden Town.
So is the birth of Daniel Kaluuya and of punk rock?
Yes, they're at similar time. It was. I think when it came in, I was like, this is incredible. Like, do you know what I mean? And it's just the synergy, and just me growing up and seeing punk, like as a kid, just seeing purple hair and spikes and Dr. Martens just everywhere. And I think it really captured that essence, Spider-Punk, and then the design really captured how crazy Camden is. It's kind of like an island in and of itself.
And we relied on Daniel for proper slang and proper, like, how would you say this, if you're just hanging out with your pals, and so many of the phrases and things, I didn't grow up in Camden, I don't know, but you're like, you'd say like, oh, we gotta say this line, this people back home are gonna go crazy if I say it like this, and having that kind of authenticity is really hard. And like, normally when you see Daniel in a movie these days, he's doing an American accent, but to hear him do his real voice is pretty exciting.
It's been years since I've played an English guy.
The internal audition, like before you even on the thing, was you in an interview on the talk show. that we just ran against the footage of Spider-Punk. And we're like, that's the only way.
Yeah, we were really hoping you said yes.
Yes.
Because like, basically we're building a character around your interviews on talk shows. So,
If SAG didn't get the contract they did, you could just AI his performance.
Oh, wow.
I'm serious.
But fun. It's interesting you mention it because like this movie is made by machines, right?
Right.
But as Justin pointed out, like they're really just tools. A machine, a pencil is a machine, and all it does, it's a lever that is meant to amplify the gesture of a human being. And so that's what these, like all this technology, like the way that we had to figure out like Spider-Punk's look, we had to give the tools back to the performers. That's how it looked good, because those posters, like the reason they look like that is because they make them super fast,
Right.
And they do them the night before the show, like there's a spontaneity there, and so we couldn't create rigidity with that look. We had to give that spontaneity to the animators to like make a choice because it felt right in the moment, not because they were like following a style guide. Right? So that's the brilliance of like the VFX team on this movie.
Right.
It's like they understand that a computer's job is to collapse the distance between the audience and the artist making the movie, not to create distance.
And every shot is a VFX shot. And when you think about like in this movie, every shot is a VFX shot. And when you think about Gwen's world, where it's reflecting her internal experience, her mood, like the world around her changes with how she feels. Every conversation with every artist and every VFX person isn't about the technical aspect of it. It's about what's Gwen feeling in this moment, and that's what's dictating what this shot looks like.
Let's talk about feelings, because I think it's important. Not your own, but the feelings of the character, because we'll do that later. But this conceit of most superhero movies is they don't need help navigating real life. They need help navigating the villain or the fight or whatever it is. These characters spend a lot of time navigating the real world because they're younger and they're talking about their feelings. I bet you put a stopwatch on it. A third of this movie is people in a room talking about their feelings. Half, okay.
The first time we screened it, we were like, oh, we're in trouble. Because only half of this movie is people in tights flying around. And the other half is people in rooms talking. They're going to hate it. And we were dead wrong. That's the part they like the best.
Right, but that's clearly a decision that you make early on and you're committed to it. Why was that important, and how does that work in service of the larger story you're trying to tell?
I mean, before they even answer, I gotta say, like, if you haven't already acknowledged it, like, this film is like a feat of screenwriting. I don't think that gets talked about enough.
Right.
Like what Phil and Chris did from a screenplay perspective. If you haven't seen it online, you should really actually read the script. It's a different experience, because so much of the emotion, so much of the direction is like there on the page. And I've read a lot of fucking scripts, and like what these guys and Dave Callahan did together, considering all the different characters, the story plots, everything that need to be managed in one film, is really like a feat. So not to cut you off, but I just like really got to give you guys some love
very
for like one of the.
And everybody here contributed to that screenplay.
Yeah, it's really a feat of screenwriting, and I'm a big believer in like it starts on the page, and this is a unique challenge because when you make an animated film, you make it in sequences out of order. So you're working on scenes, and then you put these scenes together not knowing how they're going to all come together. And then when they don't work initially, you then have to like go over the whole thing again and give it some like synergy. And that is like, again, this was one of the most like colossal things on the page I've ever been exposed to. I think the first time we put the script together, how many pages was it?
It was over 200 pages.
Yes, it was. So yeah,
It's over 250 pages.
Okay. We'll have a different conversation about what Tom Rothman said when you showed him that.
Oh, man.
The title page of the screenplay, by the way, says based on the collective work of thousands of writers and artists over the last 60 years or so. I'm going to ask you about the Guggenheim Museum scene, just as a case in point. I love the Jeff Koons jokes, but is this art? It's meta art, but if you're a live action filmmaker, you don't get past the security guard at the Guggenheim. Even when you do a lot of CGI and green screen, you don't get in there. In animation, you can, but does that mean you can do anything? Do you start from infinite possibilities and work backward? Or do you start from, I don't know what we can do and work toward infinite possibilities? Does that
We
make sense?
start with infinite possibilities, and then there are limitations that get put on based on practicality. We literally, obviously we had to talk to Jeff Koons about using his art in the movie.
And you still need the Guggenheim specific.
Exactly.
Right.
We need to get the Guggenheim
That was
specific.
But you're not going in there blowing
We were
stuff
gonna
up.
change the name of it, right? We were gonna call because the Peggy Guggenheim is the one in Venice. We were gonna call this one the Peggy Guggenheim, and they were like, "You can't do that." But yeah, and with Jeff, it was like a call. He really admired the first movie, and was a call to say like, and he was the inspiration that led us to agree to do it in the first place. And so we called because we were like, oh, you can chop and screw. We were at his retrospective at the Whitney. It was, but the Guggenheim is a more distinctive shaped building, so that's why we put it there. And I was looking at that chrome bust that he did of like Louis the 16th, and it's so. I was like, oh, you can take an old thing and you can make it new,
Right.
and it can become its own work of art. And so then we were like, maybe we can make a postmodern Spider-Man movie.
I will say staging in there though. We did start real world Guggenheim, and we
Oh.
quickly realized
It's like a
we need 17 stories, yeah,
Right.
to make
Yeah.
some of these
It
shots.
goes deep underground.
Right.
If we want to be really nitpicky, I think our BG characters are more Whitney than Guggenheim.
Oh.
I think that's
Just
fair.
everything that's just
That's
a
fair.
proper New
real,
Yorker.
I have a couple last questions. The penultimate one is about mindset. Is your mindset that you're making a live action movie that happens to be animated? Because there are rules of live action that sometimes are violated by motion capture or performance capture. For example, Robert Zemeckis can fly a camera through a keyhole. James Cameron says, I'm not going to put a camera where a camera can't go. So no flying through keyholes for James Cameron. They have different rules for what you can and cannot do in animation. Do you have live action rules that you apply to animation?
Yeah. Well, we spend a lot of time
Yeah.
in the camera department, like setting up shots, going like, how would they shoot this if we were shooting this scene between Miles and his dad, or how would we shoot this scene with Gwen and Miles sitting at the top of the world upside down, and like if we start with French overs and then we come back to we cross the line and then we go to traditional overs, and then where would the cameraman be here?
Right.
And that's what makes you feel like you're in the scene, is if you're not, but then you're like, okay, now we're gonna go do a crazy action scene, and then
even the biggest stuff is emotionally driven, so it doesn't
Right.
feel gratuitous in the way that we're doing it for doing its sake. Everything is driven by what the characters are on.
It's about why would we put the camera?
Right.
Right.
Whose point of view is this shot from?
Right.
Whose internality does it represent?
When the first film came out and you started work on the second, I think they were pretty much same time. I'm sure you had this idea of how do we not do more of same but something different? As a creative challenge, how did that play out? What were the most difficult things about doing something different rather than more of same? I guess that's anybody, please.
I think because this was a different story, it was its own story from the very beginning. It just had different needs, and we just leaned into the emotional needs of this film from the very beginning and made a standalone film that we wanted to say different things with our characters and their emotions. So they required just different things on screen. We didn't start talking about Gwen's world as a, hey, let's challenge ourselves to do something cool. It was, how do you tell the story of a teenage girl who isn't seen by anybody and feels invisible and can't express herself and feels trapped in this world where she wishes she could say what she needs to say? So what if the world could respond in real time to that? And then we started looking at her comics, and we started looking at, and it just kind of organically became this amazing opportunity. Hey, wait a minute. We could actually do something really amazing here that supports our story, supports our character, and gets on screen this idea of a girl who's like blue in this room while her dad is warm and the room is warm. And then when she's sad, even though she's not crying, the room can cry for her. Like, that idea was like coming from an internal place, like Phil is saying. We were trying to just take the internal thinking of this character and externalize it the whole time. And that led us to all of these really cool, awesome ideas that we invited our crew to just bring to the screen.
Yeah, like as a new guy on this film, I thought the first film was a masterpiece. I had nothing to do with the first film. Just as someone watching it in a movie theater, I was really blown away. And I think one of the mistakes one can make is to try to copy or just like make it but like a little bit better.
Right.
And I think one of the exciting things about this is that film, we all loved it, and we were just trying to do something completely different. A great example is on the first film, I don't think I'm wrong in saying one of the most iconic moments is this moment called the leap of faith. Miles jumps off a building, and the camera does these amazing things, and people are like, what's going to be the leap of faith moment in this film? And it's like, there's not going to be a leap of faith moment. I love that the most iconic moment in our film is Gwen and Miles sitting upside down,
Right.
having a quiet conversation. It's literally emotionally the opposite of the leap of faith moment.
Yep.
It's this very internalized. It's a button on a scene that has a lot of close-ups, which you don't see a lot of in animation. Dramatic moments, long pauses that end in a quiet, contemplative moment. And it's like we didn't even try to do a leap of faith.
But yet the ambition of this movie that has 6 universes and 1 million new characters is not about its breadth. It's about its depth.
Yeah.
Well said. I want to thank Chris, Phil, Joaquim, Jake, Kemp, Jason, Justin, and Daniel, not only for joining us, but I want to thank you for coming out and sticking around. And I want to thank you for making this amazing movie. Thank you. Thank you.